Oh, in that case, Chris Stephens, and there's 4 of you wanting to speak then.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. It's a pleasure to follow my honourable friend from Edinburgh East. I will, of course, touch on similar themes in my contribution. Let me first of all say Saturday, the 29th of October, would have been the 100th birthday of my grandmother, who was an SNP voter and independence supporter. I am proud to be a third-generation SNP voter. I am proud to represent a constituency which had the second highest number of individual yes voters in Scotland, only topped by Dundee West, and the competition will be on the next time, let me assure you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and if Western Bartonshire want to rise to that challenge too, we would more than welcome that. And it's important that that's recognised, because you would think, listening to some of the contributions today, that not one constituency in Scotland had voted for the proposition of Scottish independence, but many constituencies did, of course, vote for the proposition. And what has been fascinating in this debate so far is that not one speaker arguing the case against independence or arguing the case against a referendum has told us what they believe are the conditions that would apply in order for there to be a referendum. And I find that deeply fascinating that they have said that, in their view, there's not enough support, but they won't tell us what is required in order for there to be a referendum. Deeply fascinating indeed. But I have to say, there's been a number of contributions which I found strange, and I have to say, I thought he had left, but I see he's behind the Deputy Governor-General, the Honourable Member for Aberconwy, and it's with a sense of endearment that I used that particular title. But the member for Aberconwy talked about the ships that are hosting Ukrainian refugees. Well, I've been on that ship. It's a nice ship, it's got really good conditions, and I can tell him I've had 0 complaints about the conditions on that ship. But every single week I get complaints about the conditions of Home Office accommodation for asylum seekers and the overcrowding. And why is that the case? Because the Home Office have argued, Mr Deputy Speaker, that they do not need to comply with Scottish housing standards. They don't need to comply with local authority standards going abroad. So it's quite curious, I have to say, that he mentioned that example when the reality is it's the Home Office and their conditions that they're applying which cause real deep resentment for those who are seeking sanctuary in this country. Now, Mr Deputy Speaker, I was also fascinated by the Secretary of State's contribution about a union dividend. What is the largest growing sector of the economy in the last 12 years? And that's the number of food banks in this country. That is not a union dividend. And I think we need to reflect on the fact that there are far too many citizens across these islands who are having to depend on food aid, including, Mr Deputy Speaker, working people who are having to use these facilities. We've just advertised today for a larder in Cardonald, and we know that many of those users will be working people, which is why we'll be opening them in evenings so that people can utilise and use these services. The union dividend is the number of food banks in this country is no dividend at all, I would argue. Now, why is it that those of us who are still trying to prosecute the case for Scottish independence are still doing so? And it's because on the days after the referendum, when David Cameron stood up and he talked about English votes for English laws and basically said, Scotland, you've had your fun, that drove a number of people, that was very much resented by a number of people. And it was the nasty campaign, the negative campaign, and yes, the fearful campaign against Scottish independence, which has ensured that we're still debating this issue, because there was not a positive case put forward by those who wish Scotland to remain in the United Kingdom that was ever used during that campaign. Now, I want to spend a bit of time in the minutes I've got left, Mr Speaker, to touch on the issue which my good friend from Edinburgh East made, and which is a key part of the Scottish Government's paper, which I was curious that no one had criticised, incidentally, and that is the issue of workers' rights. We really need to get away from this obsession that the current government have of always being on the side of the bosses and always being on the side of making sure that their view of insecure work should be the model going forward. I want to see an independent Scotland saying that there will be no zero-hour contracts in this country. I want to see trade unions have the ability to go on strike without fear of being taken to court on cheap charges. I want to see trade unions being given the right to actually use online and secure workplace balloting, because if it was good enough for the Conservative Party to use workplace voting and online voting to select the Prime Minister who crashed the economy, then surely it's good enough for trade unions to do so. We need to change the way of the world at work and to bring dignity and fairness to the workplace. And unfortunately, this place will never articulate a way of doing so. And that is why I will always continue to argue for Scottish independence and votes for the Scottish National Party.